Hi everybody, welcome to this week's Meditation Mastery. I am sitting here right now in Bend, Oregon. So I was in Eugene for a couple weeks and now I'm here. Bend, it's like high desert, so it kind of almost feels like Flagstaff, Arizona or something like this. So it's very dry and it's very high up, so even the air is thin. It kind of reminds me of, when I was traveling through the Himalayas in India and stuff, and it gets difficult to breathe when you get to higher altitudes. And I don't know if my body is traumatized from like the trip I took to Tibet some years ago or what, but I feel that every time I'm breathing and I can feel that the altitude is starting to get to me and that the air is thin, I feel like my body almost wants to panic. It almost remembers how hard it was when I was, super high up. So yeah, I'm feeling like a bit of a headache and I feel like dry and it's kind of this weird heaviness, and it's interesting. It's interesting to be in different altitudes and to kind of feel that out. So as part of this talk today, I try to always just talk from my experience of kind of where I'm at, what I'm going through, and kind of tying it in a lot of ways. And this is for me and Shannon, this is getting towards the end of our trip. So it's starting to become a little bit, so I would say that we're a little bit tired. We've been traveling a lot. It's been a long couple months. And it's getting colder out, so things are kind of starting to move slower, and we're finding, that we'd rather spend some more time inside than outside doing stuff. And there's something about the natural progression with the seasons, slowly as it gets colder, that we slowly start to come inwards. And simultaneously, just that there's almost like a little bit of a sense of irritation around when things start to become uncomfortable. I find back in Boston is, when it gets to wintertime, you maybe find more people that just stay home, or more people that then go to bars. Or actually I find more people come to my meditation classes and healings. Sure, because it gets dark early and because, there's nothing to really do outside. But I feel that during the winter, people actually also need it. That as things on the physical level start becoming uncomfortable, that the mental and emotional levels start to react and rise up. And this is something you can probably all see, that if you're physically not feeling that good, you'll most likely also have like a shorter temper, a shorter fuse. That when the body doesn't feel good, when you don't feel good in the body, there's this wish to kind of escape from the situation, and there's an inner tension that's always there, and it becomes really easy to kind of snap for a lot of us. So it's always interesting to kind of watch that correlation between how the body's doing and then what the mind is doing and how the mind is doing. So as we've been traveling, it's been also a really interesting experiment of practicing open communication and being non-judgmental of things, because especially like myself and Shannon, like as we're traveling, it's we'll have like an argument and then we'll just start like laughing about it, and we kind of just say whatever we feel and just throw it out because there's nothing to lose. But simultaneously, just keeping it light and just seeing how silly it is, things that we feel, and just kind of the places that the mind goes when you just kind of let it express whatever it wants to when it wants to. And especially we've been noticing that it's really easy to get, I would say, lost in the smaller picture when you're not doing so good. We have something in us that kind of clicks into a survival mode. And this is what we were actually finding a lot back in Boston when we were working really hard to make money, to kind of get by. And you're so focused on just kind of paying the rent and feeding yourself and doing what you have to do in your life that you're just kind of trying to survive, and you don't have that ability to really step back and expand and to feel things. This is something, again, that can happen if you're having any physical problems, but this is also something that happens when you're having an emotional problem, when you're having crisis in life, that you don't have the opportunity to kind of look around and see other things. You get very focused on the present moment, and you also get focused on the things about the present moment that you don't like. And this also can turn us into almost like cranky pessimists in a way, that we focus on the things that we don't like. We focus on the things that we wish weren't there. And this is a habit, I think, that a lot of us have, that our mind, it really quickly goes to the things that we don't like, the things that we don't want. And we kind of focus and we zoom in on those things, and it becomes all that we see. We went recently to a talk at a Unity church, and Unity, it's like an all-denominational spiritual center. They kind of lean towards Christianity, but it's an all-denominational. And the day that we were there, I think this was in Eugene, they had two men come up and they gave a talk about a book that they were writing about gratitude and gratefulness. And one of them was saying, he feels that gratefulness, although it often feels like it's something that you do, he said it should actually be more like something you just are, or something you experience. And he really spent a lot of time thinking about gratefulness. That is gratefulness like an action? Should you be like actively grateful? Or is gratefulness something that's kind of already just woven into the fabric of our experience, or woven into the fabric of our minds, but sometimes we're kind of tuned into that frequency and sometimes we're not. And I think it was a very fascinating talk, because it also kind of is just a nice reminder that says, how much of what you're going through in your life is a product of the actual situation and the actual circumstances, and how much of it is a product of your way of relating with it, of the pieces that you decide to focus on, the story that you decide to build. But is that the full picture, right? Is there more going on? Could your experience actually shift into a more positive way because you are deciding to focus on it in a different way? And something like gratitude or appreciation, these are things that one could potentially feel all the time, even for situations that are maybe difficult. I remember my grandmother when she was, 90 years old. And I'd say, Grandma, how are you doing? And I knew that she's older and she's feeling sick, and she was kind of in and out of the hospital. And she said, I'm still here. What can I complain about? This like old Jewish woman. And there was something really nice about the way that she would answer these questions, because she never let herself feel victimized. She never it didn't seem like the weight of the world was getting to her. It seemed almost like the opposite, that she was just really grateful for the fact that she's still alive. She's grateful for the fact that she has like a nice family, that she's still here, that she has things in her life that maybe it's just so elemental, but maybe it's because she decides to focus on those things, that even though, maybe her body's in pain and maybe things aren't going right in her life, she doesn't focus on that. She doesn't get heavy. It's not getting like into some kind of like a depression. She was just still very kind of happy and very, there with it, and it was all okay. And there was something very inspiring about that for me, I remember, because I thought, I complain about things all the time, big things, small things, probably mostly small things. I'm cold, we're out of ketchup, just things that are just so random and silly in the larger context. But I'd let those things kind of ruin my day, or ruin my meal, or ruin my night. And when you talk to somebody like that they would have every reason to complain. They would have every reason to feel like the victim of life, and to be self-pitying, and to want your empathy or sympathy. But she was very kind of responsible for her own happiness, responsible for her own positive outlook on life and on the situation. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing to have. I don't think there's a coincidence that Christmas, for instance, and Hanukkah both are happening around the winter time. That all of these festivals of lights we have during the time where there's the most night. That as the sun is setting earlier and earlier, and the night gets longer and longer, that we have these festivals and these ceremonies where we bring the light forth, that we remind ourselves of the light. And seasonal depression, kind of seasonal mood, I don't know like what the official name of that is, seasonal mood something disorder. A lot of people back home seem to have that as it starts to get darker, they start to feel kind of more depressed, more heavy, more unhappy. And then it maybe picks up again when it gets warmer in the spring. And Boston, we really have all of the seasons, so we really get that. And there's something to be said about this kind of social or cultural time where we make Christmas time and we have like this music, we make it jolly and warm, and the fireplace and the presents, that we really try to remind ourselves in the darkest times of all of the gifts that we have, of all of the goodness, that we've created something culturally to bring up that new perception of looking at things, that this is a fun time, this is a good time, this is a time to be, huddled close together with the ones you love, and sharing your warmth in this place where, there's nothing to do outside, so you turn in. And also actually in Buddhism, in the time of the Buddha, in India, there's the monsoon season. So I think it's like 3 months that happens around summertime, where the rains kind of come in and everything's just rainy. And the Buddha said to his monks, during that time, don't go out anywhere. Stay in one spot. Stay in one spot and practice there. And use that as a time of intense retreat, to really go deeply into your practice, to really use the condition of it not being really so conducive to go out, to really then go in, to jumpstart your path inward. And it's kind of brilliant. There's a genius to using the conditions that are there to kind of jumpstart or slingshot your practice. I say slingshot, I think often of when NASA's sending the satellites up into Pluto, and the way they do it is they send it up to the moon or something, and they have it spin around the moon a few times to build up momentum, and then slingshot, right? That they're using the natural gravity that's there to propel them where they want to go. And there's something about using the conditions and the situations that we have to propel us in the direction that we want to go. And again, it's really easy to feel victimized by life. It's really easy to think that things are happening to us, right? That we're out of control. And there's really something wise. There's really something to be said about taking an empowered role and really seeing how we can use our own mind, how we can use our own relationship to life and to situations, and to see, how can I use this situation to learn? How can I use this situation to grow? There is this great monk, Ajahn Sumedho, and he's an English monk, so he's British, and he actually went and lived in Thailand for many years. And I remember reading from him that he went and he lived in a cave during the rain time in Thailand, so it was really hot, it was raining, and he said he was just sitting there sweating in his robes. And he said, and he's just thinking about everything that's happening around the world, and that there are these great masters traveling giving teachings, and that he was saying, in San Francisco there's LSD and people say they're getting enlightenment from this pill, and there's all this stuff happening. And yeah, I think he wrote this in like the 60s, 70s, and he was saying, and I'm just sitting here sweating through my robes in this cave, like, what am I doing? And then he eventually said, there's something about this that it still feels like I'm looking for the answers outside of myself, that I think there's something else besides this. And his eventual kind of conclusion to this is that he said, what? Even if I learn a little bit of patience, even if this experience lets me have a little bit more patience, then it was worth it. Then I've made the most of my life. If in this lifetime I got a little bit more patience, then this was worth it. And he really decided, instead of fighting against a situation, instead of looking for a way out of the situation, he said, what happens if I just stay in the situation and I really rest in the situation and I let it be difficult and I let it weigh on me, and I really see, it just holding that space, space of discomfort, that in itself is a practice. It's building the muscle of forbearance, right? Sitting and holding something. I've talked about this a lot in these talks, especially with this trip that I'm on, the uncertainty of it all, not really knowing how this is going to end up, paying for everything on a credit card and just watching ourselves go into debt, and not really knowing how that's all going to work out. And holding just a general space of discomfort around the whole thing, because it's so uncertain, it's unknown, there's no security, but also saying, what? I am willing to hold that because I believe that something beautiful will be birthed from this. And also really using that as a practice to say, I can really forbear, that I can sit in a situation that doesn't have a clear end, that doesn't have a clear resolution, but not let that get to me too much, right? Not let that make me miserable, feel weighted down, not need to go to bars and get drunk or watch TV all day to forget about it, to really allow myself to be in a situation that's maybe difficult, maybe uncomfortable or painful, and not try to run away from it. While I was actually traveling in India, I did my own retreat in a cave, and I remember I'd go up and sometimes it would get very cold. Remember, like, it would be very cold there. And I kind of was, meditating and practicing a lot, and I had this really kind of thin monk robe that I was using sometimes, and it wasn't enough. And I would get really cold, and because I was very mindful, I noticed that when I was cold, my body would tense up. Everything would get really tight and tense, and there'd be this cold, and I'd be very tight. And I had this feeling eventually, I was like, you know what? It feels like I'm fighting the cold. I'm like resisting it. I'm trying to hold my heat in, and the cold's there, and I'm here, and I don't want it. And I tried to flip that around, and I decided just to relax. And I decided to relax and breathe and allow the cold in and breathe it in. And suddenly when I relaxed and just allowed it, I realized it wasn't even that cold, that there wasn't really a problem anymore, that there wasn't this thing that I was trying to get away from, that actually everything was fine. And my resistance was really what was causing the biggest problem. So now, around here, even in Boston, when I'm walking in the winter and I realize that I'm cold, and of course I wear a jacket and things, but if it's not working, I practice surrendering. I practice releasing, relaxing, breathing in. I see this also happens if I have like an emotion I don't want to feel. My body gets tense. If I'm in a conversation with somebody and they say something I don't like, or I want to say something that I'm not, my body gets tense. And every time, if you watch your body, you'll see that your body tenses up when it's resisting something. Your body gets tight because it doesn't want something. And when you learn just to relax, to breathe into your body, to get rid of that subconscious, that's like a subconscious cue that says, I'm not fighting anything, it really allows you to be in a present situation and kind of just forbear, to be present with what's there. And the word forbearance, it's, I feel that a lot of people use that word to symbolize heaviness, right? You're forbearing, you're kind of under this weight. But yeah, my teacher Ajahn Brahm, he said, the word patience, it doesn't mean that like you're waiting for things to change. It means you're finding peace with things how they are. So you would be willing to wait forever and not have it change. He said, if you're like waiting for something to change, he said, that's not patience. That's really like aversion to the present moment with like a wish for the future. And they say patience is a virtue. That doesn't sound like a virtue. To resist the moment with a wish for things to be different in the future and kind of like, like be waiting and be kind of like unhappy with it, but knowing it'll change. That doesn't feel very virtuous. That feels actually like you would just get miserable. Whereas if you could really learn just to be present with things as they are and say, you know what, even if this never changes, I will still be able to be peaceful. Like Ajahn Sumedho said, even if I'm sitting here and sweating and nothing changes, at least I will find a little peace, right? Or my grandmother, at least I'm alive. Yeah, looking really for ourselves and seeing what is that thing that we can hang our hat on? What is inside of all that we could say, you know what, like at least I'm here. At least I'm healthy, right? At least I'm alive. At least I have friends. At least I have family, right? It could be worse. And I hate when people tell me that, when I'm going through something, it could be worse. But it's really important to look, what are the things we have in our life right now that we could be grateful for when everything else falls apart? What can I say, well, at least there's hope, and even if that's all that there is, even if all we have is hope, and that hope doesn't have any form, it's just hope that things can change, hope is still enough. Yeah, there is still something like, at least things can get better. Or when it gets really bad, well, at least it can only go up from here. Finding whatever it is that you need to kind of get yourself through these different situations, but really allowing ourselves to find that little nugget of something that we can be grateful for allows us to forbear, to go through situations that would otherwise be difficult. And again, not judging ourselves, not judging if we're angry, not judging that I should be feeling different. I want to be feeling that, but I'm not, which means I'm a failure. A lot of people do that. They judge themselves. If I'm not happy, if I'm not empowered, it means like I'm doing something wrong. So really just taking away those judgments and really finding a way just to feel how you're doing, where you're at, how the situations around you are affecting you. What are the things you can, of course, change and work through, and what are the things that you really have to accept and forbear? And in the heart of the forbearance, in the heart of the darkness, right, we light those candles, we give those Christmas presents. Like, what is the the beauty that we can find in the darkness, in the darkest moments. Yeah, what is the thing that we can really use to light us, to give us warmth, to give us something to hold on to still feel good, to get us through, because everything does keep changing. Yeah, things are not always going to be this bad one way or another way. Things are always kind of playing around. I'm actually trading on the stock market these days, and I'm just watching how stocks are going up and down, up and down. And I'm on the chat rooms, and I see when it goes down, people freak out. When it goes up, people are like, yay. And it just goes up and down. And maybe there's like movements of up and down within that, but it's just up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's really how I feel about life too, you know? You wake up, you feel great, then suddenly you feel cranky, then you get tired, then you have a burst of energy again, then not. You know, and everything is always just in such a state of flux that we need to learn how to let that fluctuation not really affect us so strongly. How when it goes down, we don't fall into despair. Yeah, we don't feel like everything is wrong, right? It's hopeless, there's nothing left. And also when it goes up, to really receive that and cherish that, but also not to feel like we have to hold on to that. Because I see those two extremes. People are either fighting when things aren't going well, or they're trying to hold on when things are going well. And really knowing that there is going to be just a natural flow of things. And there's something about, you know, in Taoism, they say it's like being one with the Tao. You're kind of just part of this flow of how things are. And you don't feel like you need to hold or force or push away or kind of control, right? The ego wants to control, wants to have things a certain way so it feels good, so it feels safe and secure and that it exists. And really learning how to make peace with things that are moving. It's kind of the real definition for freedom. Right? We find freedom when we start to let go of trying to make things a certain way, when we allow ourselves to be the way that we are, when we allow things to be the way that they are, and we start to change our relationship to them in a positive way, in a beneficial way, in a way that brings us more hope and more courage and more power and strength and joy and freedom. And a lot of that is a mental change, right? A lot of times we get so focused on the physical, the material, trying to actually accumulate things, to get things, to have things, to make things look a certain way on the 3D material realm. But so much of our happiness is not to be found there. A lot of people that are grasping for that stuff, they never find it. They just get lost and distracted in that. So actually, there's something to be said about taking a step back, dropping in with yourself, and really feeling like right now in this moment, what is it that I can be thankful for? What can I be grateful for? What are the things and what is the light in the middle of the darkness that I can connect to, that I can hold on to, that I know, you know, at least things aren't that bad, right? At least I still have this. At least I'm still here. At least things are still okay. I'm still alive. I still have a chance. I still have the ability to change things. Right? Things still have the ability to change. There's still hope. I'm just at least happy that I have this body still, right? Because you could be dead. And there's a businessman that I knew in Germany, and he'd say to me, you know, every morning I wake up and I think I could always kill myself. And it was kind of this morbid joke, but there was something interesting in it. And he said, because then no matter what happened during the day, he said it was never that bad, because he knew at the end of the day he could always be dead. And that's worse than everything. And he goes, if it ever gets that bad, then like, yeah, I could just be dead and that would be it. So at least I'm alive. So he said every day, he almost had like a proactive version of like, I'm alive. He said, well, I'm not killing myself today, which again, it was like morbid, but he was like an artist and he thought it was like funny. But there was something in that in terms of like, if every day you wake up and you say, well, you know what, I'm alive. So let's see what I can do today. And some days you can create greatness and beauty. And some days you can just curl up in a ball and just try to survive to the next day. And both of those are fine. Both of those belong. All of this belongs. All of your experiences belong. It's all a part of it. Yeah, and we have to do our best to see just how can I stay present, how can I stay sane, how can I stay mostly happy within all of this change, all of this turmoil. How can I get that light in the darkness and forbear the heavy things, but also find that patience and find that way to say, you know what, at least this is going right. And even if nothing's going right, well, at least now I'm making an experience of the dark night of the soul. At least I'm making an experience of rock bottom. At least now I know how bad it can get and know it's as bad as it can be, and it's still okay. I'm still here. As bad as it could possibly be, I can still handle that. And that's powerful to really see that and look, to see how strong you are within that. So I just kind of wanted to give that as an impulse again, especially as it's going to be slowly getting darker, as it's getting colder, as you're turning inwards, getting tighter, you know, bracing against the cold and the dark, to really start looking at what are the lights that you want to carry forth. What are the things that really support you, that really feel good, that can bring you through to the next place. And this also leads up to the new year when you make your New Year's resolutions, because once you kind of start to identify your light, that's actually something that you can ride on and that can carry you, and that can then be a source of great joy and can also grow in the future. So these are just some points for reflection. It's like getting darker as we're talking about this. So I'll go into the meditation now. I hope you're doing well, and again, remember, please write back to me on the Facebook group if you're there, if you're on the website. Give me some feedback, things you want to hear about. I'm really open to answering your questions, to seeing what's up with your practice, what themes you're dealing with in your life. If you don't want to make them public, feel free just to message them to me on Facebook or sethmonkmail@gmail.com. Send me messages on email, and I'll just know what you guys are thinking about, where you're at, and I'll happily kind of speak directly to some of that stuff. So again, thanks so much for joining this group, and let's meditate.